Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are here again on our Right Way podcast, an hour-long extravaganza, and I've got some incredible people on the line today. Anyway, but it's glad to be here. We're live on obviously YouTube, LinkedIn, X or Twitter, however we want to call it, and also Facebook as well. It's just good to have you here today as well. And so a few things. Let me just give you sort of line of where we're going and what we're trying to do today. Certainly, we're going to have some introductions. Obviously, I want to introduce you to our two guests. And then we're going to have a sort of roundtable discussion around our topic: 3 things to rescue a business that is failing. And we're going to have some Q&A as well, opportunity. So if you want to share a question, I will see some of those all come through for all the feeds on the chat here. We'll probably try and do it at the end, but if it's relevant and to continue the discussion, I'm happy to put the question into the panelists as we go along anyway. So hopefully you'll have a great time, and in terms of understanding some of the things, really just to help you to continue to have resilience in your business going forward as well. So to just introduce a few people anyway, I think it's important really. Let's get the real people who are going to make the contribution to this podcast worthwhile as well. And the first person I want to introduce you to is Chris Wooden in the house. So thank you for being here, Chris. And Chris calls himself the head problem solver at Director First, and describes his business as helping UK directors who have business debt problems find a better night's sleep. So I like that anecdote of your business, Chris. He's very much well known in the social media circles with his own live broadcast on LinkedIn and other platforms. However, for me, I think the key that I like about Chris is in for his company is that if you look at the Trustpilot, the 92 reviews on Trustpilot really demonstrates how people rate him and his business going forward. And to me, that's a testimony of a great business. So welcome, Chris, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me, Wayne. And just add there that's 92 reviews on my sort of newish venture, if you will. If you have a look around Trustpilot, my old business, who is still doing a great service for people in distress, I think they've got about 450 Trustpilot reviews. Most of them were mine as well. So
very, very
thanks
good.
for inviting me on.
All right, and the second guest joining us is Mike Deacon, and good to have you, Mike. And Mike's a professional practitioner who heads up Asset-Based Finance and Leasing Limited, a UK-based portfolio business management and finance consultancy. And ABFL arranges all forms of commercial debt finance and has access to other funding, including equity. And the type of businesses that ABFL serves include the typical private, public, not-for-profit organizations, SMEs, social enterprises, community interest companies, and the third sector, and every man and his dog. So any viable business. So welcome to the show, Mike.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for having me today. And yes, anything that breathes in business, I will try and help, rather than putting them on life support and then trying to resuscitate the dead, because that's part of the conversation today. So hopefully you'll get some insight from the conversation that ensues, and hopefully there'll be some nuggets that people can take away. And if they feel they can get in touch with any of us, then they can feel free to do so. Thank you.
Good. Right. And I'm going to go because Mike's going to continue the show. Very good. No, it's great to have you, obviously, 100%. And my raison d'etre for doing this stuff, as you well know, I help a lot of companies, especially companies who really want to grow and grow fast and profitably. And our team of entrepreneurs really focus around those things that drive growth. But you know what? Life doesn't give you always that nice growth trajectory year on year on. They do. Every business has lemons, as I call it, and times that are really hard and difficult. And I think what I'd like to really just pose is sort of the extreme case where things are really, really, really difficult. And that's why I've got these two great guys on the show, really. And so my first question to you is really, on your experience, what are the sort of signs that a business is failing? I appreciate most of the time you coming in at the back end when it's all going Pete Tong, as they call it, type of thing. But what are the sort of signs that you could have say, look, if hindsight, guys, if you did this, and did that, you could have seen the signs coming through. So let me just touch with you, Chris, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, thanks. So, yeah, I mean, the common signs are, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You just can't pay your bills on time. The minute you're struggling to repay your bills, it's a clear sign of potential insolvency. Another sign that, something's wrong is, it's taking you too long to collect the money that you're owed in. If a lot of your invoices are out of date, the 30 days, they're not getting paid in 60 days, the 90 days old, that's a clear recipe for disaster. Are your sales dropping? If your revenues are dropping as well, but your costs are staying the same, or,
Yep.
costs are going up at the moment, aren't they? So if your costs are going up and your sales are coming down, that's a perfect storm for a disaster. So I think the first thing is you're struggling to pay people on time. At that end of the month, your hair's falling out because you're like, bills coming in, you don't know how to pay them. You're doing the ostrich method, burying your head in the sand, thinking it'll be better next month. So they're the typical signs.
Yeah, sure, I like that. And what about you, Mike? And what's your experience around this?
I echo what Chris says completely. I'm the guy that's one step before Chris gets involved, because often I see a lot of small businesses, and this has been the case certainly as we emerged from the COVID pandemic, where a lot of people are really stretched. Sometimes they have suppliers demanding money yesterday and customers who want to pay in 90 days. And this is about understanding the landscape of what the possible is, to avoid getting into a pickle, which is where Chris comes in to sort the problem out. So I'm, if you like, a prevention person, a prevention tool. If people are honest enough with themselves to look at the signs and say, well, I've got a bit of stress from HMRC, I can't pay my VAT or my PAYE because my customers aren't paying me, well, then try and unlock the money from the customers by using invoice finance. Similarly, if you've got a VAT bill or an urgent requirement to grow the business, but you can't afford to recruit staff to meet demand, then you might need a business expansion loan.
Okay.
All of these things are very useful. So I'll stop there because there are solutions to problems.
No, 100%, and I think I think for me, when I see organisations, invariably they haven't got the systems and the processes in place to measure some of this stuff. And you would always say to them, well, we'll give us access to your age debtor, age creditor. Tell me what your cash flow forecast is looking like over 3 months. Tell me who your key customers are, and it's like that blank look in the faces of people. And I think for me, it's really being forensic about the detail and ensuring that you understand some of those key elements, because if you have those in place, then it makes it a lot easier for good people like you, Chris and Mike, to come in and say, okay, all right, then let's just see what's going on really under the bonnet, and try and help and support. But having that basic information to hand is incredibly hard, I see, for a lot of businesses. And I'm talking about not businesses have been trading, got 3, 4, 5 million. I had one company and they didn't even know what cash flow forecast was. I mean, it was just madness, because they used the bank. In other words, the bank was going up and going down. Okay, we're okay. And then when it was started going down and continue to go down, what's going on? But they didn't have the basic information around that to assess that. And any more final words before we start looking at some of the solutions around that, Chris?
No, I mean, I sort of echo what you've said there. It's really surprising to see how many directors out there they just they don't use these basic tools, these metrics to sort of see where they are, and not worse than they are. Where is the business today? And another thing that I see a lot is people have these systems. They have really easy to use softwares, and they don't update the bloody things. So
Yeah.
when they give you access to them and you're looking at it and you're like, well, is this updated? If you're not updating the information, it's pointless having it. So, yeah, another sign that, think you're starting to struggle is avoiding them phone calls as well. Not opening those letters. Surprising, but people will literally just go into freeze mode. So, no, nothing to add there, Wayne.
Yeah, I'll touch on that in a little while, Chris. Let me come back to that because I think that's super important as well in terms of the mindset. But Mike, in terms of when you look at obviously assessing whether a business is viable for finance, what sort of issues that you're finding in terms of not having the information, basic information to hand?
It's a great point. Chris made a great point earlier, Wayne. He basically said people have got systems, but they don't know how to use it.
Yeah.
And that's a truth. And often smaller businesses, even the sort of mid-size SMEs, they're so busy doing the job that they forget the basics of what's next. They don't plan ahead because they're living for today. And that is a common problem, especially with owner-based businesses, whether they're family business or small businesses. They're so busy deep in the tools of doing the job that they forget the basics of managing the cash.
Yeah.
And I know this because when I ask for information to basically support a package of funding that can actually get them out of the soup, they often can't provide the information because they don't really know where to look,
Sure.
or it's all a bit piecemeal.
No, it's such an important aspect, and I always say to good owners, look, you may not be how can I put it, the finance director type that is able to compile and to have these numbers, but at least know what the numbers mean when you get the information, and have somebody around who's able to do this on a regular basis. And I think, like you say, we can have all the systems in the world, we can all have the nice reports that you get every month from your bookkeeper or your accountant or whatever it is. But if you ain't got a clue what they mean, then what's the point, So, but I want to just go back to that. I'm going to take a little slight divert because I think that's a really important element that you have raised, Chris, in relation to the mindset of people when things are failing, and that this how can I put it, bunker approach, head in the sand. Can you just describe a little bit more around that? Because I mean, it's such an important element for people to realize that. Are they, because when you're in the thick of it, you don't really sometimes appreciate what you're going through in terms of emotionally and physically. And I'm sure you've seen, clearly, Chris, you've been on a back end of a lot of people who are in that space. Just describe what people go through.
Well, listen, the reason I can describe it, because I've been through it. I come into the insolvency industry in a strange way. I actually had to place a business into insolvency a number of years ago. And it was the most stressful thing imaginable. At work, I'm just trying to, I'm always thinking it's going to turn around, right? And, whether it was the HMRC breathing down my neck or a supplier, I think I'll deal with this when I've got something good to tell them. And I was an entrepreneur, so I was enthusiastic, I was optimistic, and in times of trouble, being optimistic will help you so far, because what I wasn't actually doing is being accepting of the fact that actually this might not get any better. So I've been there. You don't want to answer the phone. You don't want to tell somebody bad news. You don't want to tell a supplier that you've built a relationship. Listen, I can't pay you. And what people will do is they'll either bury their head thinking it'll go away. Listen, business debt's like toothache. It doesn't go away, it gets worse. And you can, if you don't deal with it, you're gonna end up at the emergency dentist on a Saturday morning getting it ripped out, and it's gonna hurt. You've got to take steps early, and I think it's the fear, isn't it? I mean, most of my inquiries, I will take hundreds of inquiries a month that don't end up in insolvency. Maybe they need somebody like Mike. Maybe they just need an arm around them and actually No, you speak to them like this. Don't agree to that with the revenue. Push at this. Get 12 months. Get 18 months. And I think because they've never been there, they're just frozen in fear. They don't know what to do. They feel like a failure. They don't want to admit to. Sometimes they don't want to admit to themselves that this might not work out. So yeah, that's my take on that.
No, what about yourself, Mike? What sort of things?
Well, I completely echo what Chris said, and I had a real live example last year. About a year ago, I was helping a client who had a family business, third generation, in what I would call the sort of luxury end of sort of household goods. So, nice business, very, very profitable. COVID hit them for 10, not for 6, for 10. And what they were looking for was cash flow just to keep the coffers ticking over. Now, one of the things that people don't do, and Chris alluded to this earlier on, is they actually don't tell you everything. They've got the ostrich going, the head in the sand, bum in the air, but they also don't tell you what else they're doing to try and keep people going, keep their business going.
Yeah.
And sometimes non-disclosure, i.e. they were borrowing not just from people I found, but from other sources, and to the point where they actually went bust. And they went bankrupt within 6 months because they were borrowing and robbing from Peter to pay Paul on all their assets, and ended up in such a pickle that they had to shut the business, and it cost them a lot of money, which was entirely avoidable had they planned for it maybe a year before they started asking for the cash.
No, it's so key, and I think we'll talk about some aspect in terms of that communication piece as well, but I've seen it so many times. It's that fear element really does take hold of people. And then obviously that leads to a whole load of other elements of sort of depression, and then obviously sleep deprivation, and then obviously the proclivities of gambling, alcohol and other sort of stuff that we want to talk about on this Registered 12 show, really. But the point is really that ultimately the bottom line is that people fall into other stuff to just try and get their head away from the problem. And I've many times, most of the time, when people do come to us, really, they're at their lowest ebb. Some have got fantastic businesses, but they're not quite sure which way to go forward. And for us, is us to just sort of, patch them up together, realizing that there is a solution going forward, and going and helping them through that process. And that element of hope is so key, as best as we can. I appreciate, there may be times, and obviously clearly in your case, Chris, sometimes you're a bit too late to help. But generally, the most times is that, we can, hopefully offer a solution. Or, if things going to fail and hit the wall, then let's give some hope for the future in terms of what that looks like as well. So again, helping people through that process. Just thank you for those comments there. What's your reflection on HMRC? They've put a lot of effort. I remember last year, I think that they identified quite a big recruitment drive of officers to the organisation. And I've been hearing rumblings about them really being a bit more draconian and forceful in their approach to directors and small companies, especially. What's your thought, Chris, around that? Are they coming a bit more aggressive in relation to pursuing owners for outstanding, whether it's corporation or payroll, etc. taxes?
Yeah, listen, my daily experience in this, I have seen a marked difference in the tone of the revenue since, I would say, October last year.
Interesting. So that was what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and what I, you start to, I speak to enforcement agents regularly. I will speak to people at HMRC regularly on various different matters. And it's like that there has been some type of message sent down for, it's more of a policy change, and if there's a policy change, regardless of what that person at the end of the phone wants to do, it can be very much a computer says no type of situation. The amount of mornings I'm walking in now where I have a client who I may have spoken to 2 or 3 months ago and said, listen, you've got some issues here, you need to speak to the revenue, and they may have buried their head in the sand, and they've got a petition, a winding up petition landing, that they're really starting to ramp up the action on people who aren't paying. And the solution to that, if I can come on to it, Wayne, if you don't mind, is
sure.
you've got to speak to them. Listen, the revenue, they're not as scary as people would have you make out. They're just people like me and you. And as long as you're open and you're communicating with them, it's highly likely that you'll stop action. It's when you don't speak to them and they're sending you letters, they're sending you texts. Eventually, they're going to send someone to your premises. Now, if your business address is your home address, that's even worse. So by speaking to them, and even if you're ringing them and saying, I can't afford to pay you, literally, I can't afford to pay you, or I can afford to pay you this much at the moment, that is preferable than to not doing anything. So yeah, the revenue, the gloves are off. They are out there. They want the money. They want the pound of fat flesh, and they are not as accommodating as they've been in previous years. It's like they're really tightening the grip on things at the moment.
Do you see the same thing, Mike, in your experience as well?
I'm afraid I am. And I'm also seeing larger customers, larger creditors like utility companies also sticking winders on businesses where they've not been paid bills for things like energy, gas, or supply of goods. So the key thing here is that there's also the fright that if I take an arrangement with HMRC for whatever tax I owe, my credit rating's impaired. On the contrary, it shows that the business has taken preventative action from failing. And the reason for their cash flow dilemma is it could be, suppliers demanding money quickly or customers paying slowly. Yeah. The thing is, you can rectify it and trade your way out. Not every business can, but many can, even with an arrangement pre-agreed with the revenue, because they're not going to bite your legs off. They want businesses to survive because people in work pay tax and they need tax. So it's actually in their interest to keep people and businesses in those people in those businesses alive and kicking. They don't want to see companies fail because they don't get the revenue.
No, 100%. Chris?
Can I jump in on that? Yeah. So one of the mistakes that I'm seeing directors make at the moment with these time to pay arrangements is they're agreeing to the time to pay over too short a period.
Yeah.
So you've got this dance really that the revenue want it in as quick as possible, but a director forgets where they're at in this. They've got a bit of power here. You're a limited company. You may not have dealt with the revenue before. They want to get a deal done, like Mike says. They don't want to put you out of business. So I would always go in is try and negotiate the longest time period possible, because cash flow is really, really important. Businesses
100%.
fail not because they're bad businesses, they just run out of dough. So I've had one today. The revenue want them to pay over 6 months. That's going to cripple the guy. And I've said go back at 2 years. And even if you go in at 2 years and you end up getting the deal done at 18 months or 12 months, it gives you that breathing space, because there's nothing worse to agreeing to something with HMRC and then failing, then breaching that time to pay arrangement. Sadly, a lot of the time to pay arrangements that I come across that have failed, they were always going to fail. You can't be like putting your colours to the mast on what you can pay the revenue every month if it's a good month. You need to look at this and go, well, what happens if I have a terrible month, and make your offering based on that? Because guess what? If the revenue don't agree to it, you're going to end up with somebody like me. And in that scenario, they're going to get very little back.
Yeah, agreed. And I would endorse what Chris has said, and I would actually stretch the envelope and treat the tax repayment arrangement like a finance agreement. So what would you do if you wanted to buy a truck or some machine tools? You'd spread the cost over 5 years. Yeah. Ask for 5 years. And as Chris said, if they give you 3, that's a result, because you can plan for that money going out the door, irrespective of what your future trading brings through the table, because they're only drawing a line in the sand for the historic debt at the time you make the arrangement. Anything that comes up new, you've got to pay as you go. Sometimes you can blend it into the arrangement,
Yep.
Chris, and Chris can tell me whether or not that is possible, because it can be done if you ask the question. You've just got to show willing and show historically that you are bringing enough money through the door to meet that actual arrangement with HMRC.
Yeah, the revenue, what they will say, if you fail to keep up with your current, you've breached the time to pay. Now, having said that, you're absolutely right. Even if that happens and you've got a good history, there's a chance you can get it lumped in. They'll never. I don't think they go on record to agree that. But yeah, the reality is they'll do deals with you. You know, you've just got to be. You've got to stick to them as best you can. If you're a serial offender, they're going to get fed up with you. And just
if you're a first time person, go long. Always go long, because the more time you buy, the more chance you've got to survive. It's that simple. And it also doesn't impair your opportunities, albeit more limited, to get additional finance as the business might pick up and grow, because that can happen. And the buying time gives you time to actually recalibrate your business and restart growth again, because some businesses are just short of cash and they're just fighting fires. Whereas buying time means more time to plan the cash that comes in, put systems in place to actually manage that cash. Therefore, you make yourself more attractive as a lending proposition for a lender.
It's quite interesting, in fact. You know, and I've got a couple of businesses in the US as well, so I do understand the landscape over there in terms of how they deal with the sort of Chapter 11, which is equivalent to the sort of you know, bankruptcy split. Chapter 11 is a little bit different from Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is done and dusted. Chapter 11, you get this opportunity to start again. So you keep the things going, but, you know, able to keep going. But one thing that they do, the courts do, is that they really push on you to get to know your numbers. And if they can say to you, look, you haven't got control of your business, we're going to put you in Chapter 11. Chapter 7, which is basically closing the business down. So the point is, and they don't do it so much in the HMRC side, but I always say to clients, if you are talking to HMRC, send them some information, send them some cash flow forecasts, send them, you know, an idea that at least you've got control of the business, you understand what's going on. And as you said, Mike, you know, what tends to happen is that because they haven't had the system before to manage the business, what tends to happen is that they put the time to pay in, but the systems are not in place. They haven't got a cash flow forecast. They haven't got an understanding of the issues that they have with their creditors. They're not chasing their debtors. So therefore, by definition, what tends to happen, you know, they go to this time to pay, and as you rightly point out, Chris, you know, they got a problem. I can't pay back the HMRC, and then that's when HMRC gets a bit shirty and says, "Sorry, mate, 2 strikes or 3 strikes and you're out."
I'd like to add something to that, Wayne, because I think there's another factor here that a lot of small businesses rely on, and that's their accountants. The accountants should be providing support and advice to their customers. And do they do it? In many, many cases, you see them just doing the audit ticket, and that's it. They don't actually provide the support and advice they should do for their customers. And it's in their interest too, because if a customer fails, they lose a customer, which means they lose revenue too. But I find it, and Chris, please, you know, come in with your thoughts of what you see. But I see this happen so often, where the business is not talking to the accountant and is waiting for the accountant to do the numbers every year end. They're not talking to them for the rest of the year. They just don't talk to them. And that's nuts. I mean, they should have at least talked to their accountant as the first point of reference to say, I've got a problem. What do you think I should do? But people don't have that relationship with their accountants. They just see them as a functionary to do the books, make sure they're done on time, submitted at company's house, tax paid. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Not the case. They should be talking to people regularly to just say, is this okay? Should I be doing this? Some businesses employ business coaches. Some people use people like me. But the point is, most don't. And therein lies your problem.
Okay, Chris?
I think like with accountants, you've got, you know, it's like every industry, you've got the good and the bad. And a good accountant, they'll speak whether it's monthly or quarterly. But I also see it where an accountant offers to speak to somebody and a director doesn't engage because the directors they're just looking at the cash in the till every month. It's good, or oh crikey, it's going bad. I think sometimes I get challenges with directors, accountants, because they're fabulous at what they do, but they don't understand our world.
Yeah.
Accountants and insolvency people, I'll use a football analogy, they look like they do the same thing, but a right back and a centre forward have very, very different roles.
So which one are you, Chris?
Me, I'm the big hefty centre half. You're not getting past me.
Yeah.
The ball will go past, but you won't.
Yeah. There you go.
And I think that it's just the communication. I think people are frightened to talk to accountants. But just because they might wear a suit or they're a professional, a lot of people just don't want to engage with. I don't know what that's about, but most accountants will talk to you on a level, and if they don't, you need a new one. And you've got to have that relationship with the accountant. So I think an accountant should be able to steer you through. You're right. I think sometimes when it gets towards the end and an insolvency is very real, I think that's where sometimes the information can get a bit wishy-washy. But yeah, if you've got an accountant, you've got to be utilising. They're part of your power team, aren't you? Unless you're a whiz with the numbers, which most people aren't.
No, 100%. I'm conscious of our time as well. We can talk about this for a long time, I tell you. It's such a powerful subject. But let's give the guys some hope. Okay, let's talk about some solutions as well. And obviously, the big one and the elephant in the room is the communication piece. So what the sort of first pieces of communication that people should be doing, really, or who should be talking to? We talked about the accountants as well. Who else can people call you, Chris? I mean, normally when people call you, it's like you're like the Grim Reaper, really. I don't want to call Chris because I know that's the end of me.
Well, listen. Here are the facts. Okay, 95% of people who call me do not end up in liquidation.
Lovely.
Okay?
I love to hear that.
They don't do. What they need is they've never dealt with what they're dealing with at the time, or they've been frightened to death by someone down the pub, or their accountant, or another bloody insolvency person. Where we're a little bit different at Director First is we put the director first. Listen, I don't chase jobs that aren't jobs. We're busy enough. We give them the best advice, and most of the time, the best advice is: listen, speak to people. You've got to make sure that revenue's coming in. Are there any efficiencies in your business you can make to improve things, improve profitability? Restructure debts, communicate with creditors. Speak to me if you're struggling to pay your bills on time. That's it. And the only thing that I'll ask for, I don't charge for them calls, but if you find me useful, I'd ask for a review. And even that's not compulsory. But getting out of your head, you touched on it before. When I'm in a mess, right, I'm in a mess in here. Sometimes it's my thinking that will create a problem. I can't solve the problem with the problem, okay? So by speaking to peers, coaches, mentors, people who've been there before me,
Yep.
Then I'm going to get some ideas. The biggest problem I had when I had to put it into liquidation is I'll figure this out. I did not have the frame of reference to figure out my problem. I'd never been there before. So the key thing is speak to people you can trust. And that's why that network of people around you in business is really, really important, because somebody will have been through that dance before.
Yep. No, I love it. Mike?
Yeah, I'll just add to what Chris has said, because everything he said there absolutely makes sense. I would say prevention is better than cure. So I just think that a lot of people that I come across who look for funding, I'm the last resort when I shouldn't be. I should be the first resort. Because if people need help and they need a bit of cash flow, there's a reason. There's a stress somewhere in the business. Now, my background is I ran finance companies. I worked for major banks as, major credit underwriter. So I actually know the telltale signs before they do, because I can read what's going on. So I just need people to find me and talk to me and say, this is my problem. Can you help? And they need to do it sooner rather than later. It's a realization piece. It's not about waiting for the Grim Reaper to come and take your business away. This is about, how do I protect my business, my staff, my customers, my family, right? And I put family at the end, but it's the most important thing, because the biggest problem with failure in a business is, what's my wife going to think? What's my husband going to think if it's a female entrepreneur? How am I going to reconcile failure with them? My life has gone. No. Don't do it. Don't wait for that moment to happen. If you see any sign of stress, however small that might be, that is a wake-up call for any business person to say, I think I need to look at this, because I know what's coming down the track with my business. I can see a few roadblocks ahead with customers, or I can see suppliers putting their prices up 20%. Things like that have an absolute direct impact on your business. And that's a warning sign to say, I think I need help.
Very good. Very good.
Don't wait for the bus. Make sure you're at the bus stop first.
No, 100%, Mike, and I really like that in terms of just ensuring that you realize that, and that's always the issue, isn't it? People's head is going 5-10 steps ahead, and that's what fear does, isn't it? It just drives you to the future and says this is what's going to happen, and I love that one about the missus, or your partner, or whatever it is. No, it's so real.
It's true.
I think people rather talk to HMRC than talk to their wife about what's going on, because they know the wife's going to give them a bit of an earful.
And they'll be right, because the truth hurts.
There you go. So ultimately, just being prepared and being having that formal conversation with good people, to at least that you got to have your story right, because obviously you talk to your missus, she's going to say, okay, all right, you're the man in the house, or you're the woman in the house, or whatever it is. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to sort it out? So you've got to have a plan. You can't go in there and feel, oh, well, I'm not quite sure. The house is going to go down. We can't pay for the kids and blah, blah, blah. It just doesn't work.
Who do you fear the most, the wife or husband or the taxman?
There you go.
You decide.
There you go. All right. So, I love that in terms of that communication piece as well. But coming back to the sort of, finance, and I appreciate that's the whole subject itself anyway. But just tell us, Mike, some of the sort of solutions around, helping people to refinance some of their debts and that sort of stuff. Just go through that if you don't mind.
That's fine. There are many options open. It depends on the status of the main business owner, or the directors who own the business. Do they have assets they can refinance? So, for example, people have properties. They can refinance on a second mortgage. That can be quite effective. They can borrow personally and put it in the business's director's loan. That they can do within their own control, because the business is not in stress and their personal credit rating is still good. So it's about early signs prevention. Failing that, you have businesses where they bought lots of plant machinery, which is unencumbered. You can refinance that. You can leverage your invoices with invoice finance. You can do that. You can get working capital loans where the business cash flow is enough to be able to support the repayments. You can do that. There are so many alternatives, and every business is unique. So the key thing to do for people is to talk to somebody who actually knows all the products that are available, what the potential problems that need solving are, and how to put the solutions in place before it becomes a problem. And that's really the key thing. So really, I have access to hundreds of lenders, and people, all my business is referral. I don't go out marketing for it. People know who I am and find me. And that's the thing. I can help people if people want to be helped. It's that simple.
No, sure. And Chris, we talked about, this discussion with creditors. What sort of advice do you normally give, directors, in terms of just giving that breathing space, so that, they're not going to be like, next thing they're going to be sent down to the court to try and get a CJ against them, or whatever it is.
You've just got to be open. You've got to be transparent. These people you owe money to, they've got a whole raft of people relying on them. The the potential ripple effect of insolvency, it doesn't just stop with you and your business. So speak to them early, pay them something if you can, and this sort of loops back into why your management information is so important. If you know what's coming in, best case, worst case, likely case, you can sort of make offers to pay something. And a lot of the time, your supplier doesn't want to lose you as a client either. Especially
Lovely, I love
if been a long-term supplier. It's you will be, if as long as you're having those honest and awkward conversations, they will see you in a different light to John down the road who's gone full on ostrich mode. So again, pick the phone up, do what you can when you can, if you can.
Could I just add something to that, Chris, very, very briefly? I want to use analogies, right? This is how most businesses are, a pyramid. That's your base of customers and suppliers that rely on you, and you're at the top. How many businesses are like that? So the pyramid's inverted, and all the stress at the bottom where the director sits, and they're taking all the heavy load. Think of yourself as a pyramid. Use that base. Make it easy for people. Make it easy to help yourself by going to as many people as possible, and prevent before you get into a pickle.
Yeah, it's a lovely Asian analogy I always use in terms of saying that with many advisors there's safety. That's sort of biblical one from some Proverbs, wherever it is. But it's quite fascinating how, by getting that understanding of different people view about it, and some of them may not be the one for you or for your business, but at least you get a better overview of the situation, and it allows you to make that decision. Because at the moment, your head is discombobulated. Everything is just mush. And it's super important when you, as Chris says, and obviously Mike has echoed, you just talk to various people. Don't do the man at the pub job. Get professionals around you, who are able to just talk to them. And invariably, good people like Chris and Mike, they're happy to have the conversation. It's not, not going to be there for hours, but they will have a 10-minute conversation, 15-minute conversation with you. And at least then you got a view in terms of, okay, what's probably the next steps I should probably take, and then look to get those people involved effectively. So I think for me is that again, it's coming back to this communication piece as well. Us Brits, we're notorious for not handling confrontation. We hate confrontation. We hate it with a passion. And I think, Chris or Mike, do you share anything in terms of that narrative to help people with that confidence to be able to have those awkward conversations? Chris?
Well, let's say that they're speaking to a creditor. What's the worst that can happen? Like, that they're in an absolute pickle when they call me the normally in absolute bits. And I just say, listen, you can't feel any worse than you already feel, because I know what will happen when they speak to the creditor, that they'll have a sense of relief. It's like before they call me. I wish I had £1 for everybody who says, I wish I'd have spoken to you sooner. And even that small percentage who actually end up in some type of insolvency procedure, it's I've got a head that when I have a problem, and I profess to be a positive person, but I will catastrophize. I'll think, oh God, right, I'm going to end up living in a skip. Kids aren't going to be able to be fed for, like literally that's what my mind does. And I think that's a human trait. We go to the worst case scenario and think, right, well, that's it. What's the point? And when you speak to somebody, I'm not attached to my client's problems. And, yeah. I just say, well, listen, this is what's likely to happen. They don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you've got to, if you're feeling uncomfortable, if you're feeling lost, if you're feeling overwhelmed, well, what's the worst thing that can happen is you'll have a call with someone and you'll still feel lost, overwhelmed and uncomfortable. But that isn't the deal, is it? We speak to somebody, we get some advice. We may not have the golden bullet for them, but they will sleep a little better tonight.
And what about you, Mike, in terms of that sort of financial discussions with, banks or other lenders? How do you help them create that
Well,
narrative?
it's really, really simple. When people come to talk to me, I say there's three answers to your questions. In other words, they can say, "Can you help me?" I say, "Yeah, I can help you," but I will always give you three answers, which is either yes, no, or maybe. If it's a no, it's something outside scope. I can't help them, and it may be that there is a sign of stress, and I will point them in touch with someone like Chris, who may be able to actually help them out because they're beyond the point where I can actually source their finance requirements to actually regularize their business and sort their issues out. Normally, it's a maybe because I have to do a little bit of digging. And part of the work I do as an FCA regulated broker is to ensure I treat the customer as fairly as I possibly can, which means going through all the options, giving them good and bad news about their business and solutions to their problems. And sometimes it's a yes, which is a straightforward, well, let's do this. If you're receptive to it, let's try this solution. And I'm sure that this will actually relieve your pressure point in your business, which is usually cash.
I can't hear you.
Chris, you've gone
Chris,
silent,
it's
my
me.
friend.
Yes, I know.
Oh, it's you. Yeah.
I'm
Sorry, Chris.
sorry.
Sorry, mate. Yeah.
Too many buttons. So let's sort of try and wrap things up a bit, and in the sense of just give us a flavour in terms of what people should put in place to ensure that they do not fail as a business. And obviously we've touched on a number of things, but let's just pull it all together now. So, if you wanted to just sort of just share, Mike, from your perspective, what are sort of things that business should have in place to allow them to be resilient? That's probably a good word to use. Resilient in ensuring that their business is able to cover some of the good times and the bad times. And obviously, we're talking about the bad times in this case of their business.
Okay. Resilience is very simple, which is always know how much money you've got in the bank and know when your customers are stressing. Those are two immediate pinch points which will tell you that you need to take action quickly. If you can see trouble ahead, you can see prices rising from suppliers or customers paying later. That's the first thing you should do with that is talk to a specialist financial broker or your accountant or an advisor that you use to basically say, I can see trouble ahead. Can I plan my way out of it so I can actually ride the storm? So that's really what any good business needs to do. So the first sign of trouble is act. Don't wait. Everything else follows after that, and the information can be gathered, and you can present that to a lender that can actually take the risk. Some lenders are more risk friendly than others. Many are not. A lot of the major bank lenders and challenger bank lenders are very, very picky about what they want. They want the cream of the crop. But there are plenty of non-bank lenders out there that I work with who are happy to take risk, and they like to meet people. So don't be afraid to open yourself up to actually meeting lenders in person, because I can organise that.
Very good.
So I hope that helps.
Absolutely. Chris?
Yeah, so, one of the things that people really need to keep on top of to keep the business healthy is actually how they're marketing that bloody business. The amount of times that I see directors who get into some type of difficulty, or they see a difficulty coming up, and they're like a rabbit in the headlights. So make sure you've got good deal flow coming into your business. Whatever's going on, make sure them leads are coming in. Make sure you're putting yourself out there, doing things like this, giving out content, being helpful, doing a good job. Make sure you're consistently doing a good job. Make sure you're looking at your margins. Make sure you're really tight on that credit control. You get a job done, invoice and get on the phone. Don't delay. People don't like asking for money when they're due it.
Yeah.
I'll never get my head around that.
Yeah, I agree.
And make sure you've got some accurate info. Know where you're at, know what you're spending, know what's coming in, line by line, once a month. Why would you not spend that hour It's stop wasting your money on garbage as well. The softwares you don't use anymore. Go out there. This is the time to be negotiating with your suppliers. This is the time to be negotiating with people
Love
that
that.
are offering you. Go out there, ask a difficult question. Because guess what? If you fail, they're going to lose you anyway. So, yeah. But seriously, marketing, sales. Make sure you're sharp at that, because the whole business stands up on whether you can convert that lead to a customer and then get paid for it.
No, 100%. I think for me, really, it's. I always say to clients that we work with, have you got 3 months operating cash? And what I mean by that, have you got enough cash in the bank to keep paying your clients, paying all your creditors and commitments for 3 months if you have no business coming in? And use it as a metric that if anything that there are any changes in that and you're getting down to 1 month or even 2 weeks, then hey ho, obviously you got a problem. Because when you look at the bank doesn't give you an indication ultimately of the health of the business. So having that sort of yardstick as a metric is good, but the cash flow forecast is critical.
Yeah.
And as you say, Chris, if you're not asking for money from your creditors and before you know it, the 30 days becomes 60 days, between 90 days, it's a massive problem.
Yeah.
Massive problem.
I would actually go as far as to say 6 months, Wayne.
Well,
sure.
I mean,
I think
the
that's
bottom line is that in COVID, 6 months would have been the yardstick that you should be giving for businesses, because obviously, clearly they were struggling.
correct.
But I said minimum 3 months. But the bottom line is that you've got to have an understanding of your numbers. And the other aspect is that how many people do have age creditors, or they look at the age debtor reports that they have. They find out what people are actually taking the mickey and not paying, or what creditors that you've sort of slowly sort of crept and not paying them as well, because eventually they're going to come and hit you in the backside as well. And the final one for me really is that the obvious one. I think one of you guys have mentioned it already. Talk to your customers. Understand from them where they are and where they're at, and what their plans are, what their hopes are for the future. Because when they turn off the tap, you don't invariably know it. But if you're close to them, you get a whiff of it. You get a sense of whether they are doing, good or not so good as well. And that can allow you to say, okay, well, we're going to be careful. This is a big, big client for ours. They're going to have a massive impact if we don't really sort it out. But I echo what you say about Chris in terms of sales and marketing. You've got to have your system in place to prospect, to nurture, develop, get your pipeline in place to allow you to be comfortable that your business is going to meet the needs of the future. So they're my 2 pennies worth on the discussion as well. But that's good. All right, folks. Like I said, we're going to be wrapping up very shortly as well. If there's any other questions that you may want to pose to the guests, then it's fine. I appreciate that can be quite sensitive. So in that respect, I'm going to put the details of the folk there in terms of the email addresses and contact details, so at least you can have that confidence.
Lost you again, Wayne.
So it's super important that you're able to contact them, and so I'll drop that information shortly as well. Too many buttons. Anyway, all right, let's just finish up as well. So as a summary, I think really it's the obvious, really, and I'll just show what that is going forward as well. 3 things, because that was our questions. What are the 3 things that are going to help you to stop you failing as a business? Well, clearly, have that circle. And I think Mike mentioned it. Have that circle or group of people around you who are able to help you to navigate your way through different things, whether it's on the finance sector, financial debt restructuring, and that's where obviously Mike and his team can help you with. Or it's really just understanding, you've got some issues with HMRC. Chris is able to help you with that, as well as, obviously the advice, but I'm sure he'll do some pro bono, not a pro bono, but also some paid work for you on that to help you to have the right narrative and the right discussion so you can get the best out of the deal with HMRC. So Chris is really good at that as well. Second aspect, as we talked about as well, talk to your creditors, talk to people who you owe money to, and negotiate the same thing as you would do with HMRC. Just be able to, look at longer term finance arrangement, payback arrangements. Negotiate if possible even better terms. We even know that's going to be slightly a long stretch, especially if you're having trouble with them in the first place. But just if you don't ask, I always say in this world, if you don't ask, you don't get. Ask, ask, ask the question. You always get an answer that is not favourable, but ask, and invariably, sometimes you'll get the right answer back as well. And the third one we haven't really talked about is talk to your team. And sometimes I appreciate it's difficult. It's really hard to do that. The last thing you want to be seen to your team is that you're a failure in the process. And I think for me, I think that sometimes our people are, how can I put it, the resource that is going to help you invariably get yourself out of the hole. They have probably the ideas that you may not have because your head is so over and difficult and just discombobulated and mushy and all the rest. It's just hard to think. And having somebody who's able to think for you, around you, and understand the business and able to come up with other innovative solutions to move things forward could be of benefit. Now, your team better than anybody else, how you can do that, whether you can do that, but it's important to think about talking to your team. Or I would always say as well, tell them what's going on in the sense of, look, we're a bit of a hole at the moment. Customers are not whatever, blah, blah, blah. What can we do as an organization to really move things forward? That has worked. I've seen that worked. I've employed that work in doing turnarounds in the parks for companies and organizations. It works. So please, if you want some more information around that, then obviously, again, all of us are happy to engage around that as well. So hopefully that helps. Final words, folk, and I'll just obviously give some details to people in terms of where they can get to find you as well. But Chris, final words from you.
Listen, I just want to pick on something you said before. You aren't your business. If your business fails, it doesn't mean you failed. That business has failed, right? It's not you who's failed. But it's important not to tie the two up. Speak to people early. Even if insolvency is the only way forward, there are even ways that you can come through insolvency and continue, running a company. You can pre-pack it, you can start again. Don't be alone. You're not the only one who's going through a tough time right now. The insolvency figures are the highest they've been in years. Take advice early, and thank you for listening to me today.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate that. And Mike, final words from you.
Yeah, I like what Chris says. And I will just add one thing to it. And that is your business team is actually your biggest asset. If you're a business owner, why wouldn't you be using your team? And if you work as a team, the word team is very, very important because it means you're in it together. And take professional advice as quickly as possible because there are ways of saving businesses. And I've helped refinance businesses which are, a pre-pack which is being bought out. Sometimes the business team buys the business from the business owner. It's not unusual. It happens. And therefore, make sure you value your team because they're the most important thing that you've got other than the customers that you serve.
Fantastic. Appreciate that, Mike. In terms of getting hold of us, clearly, please, if you're in that little pickle, please contact us. There's the email address. Take a screenshot of that if you need be. Chris Worden on obviously his email address there, and obviously Mike as well, and obviously myself over here. If you want to know some elements in terms of how to grow your business, then our 10 Commandments of Business Growth is on Amazon, on Kindle, and also on Audible as well, that you can also get. That gives you an understanding of some of the principles that we've talked about, again, in this podcast. Thank you again, everybody. You've been fantastic. Really appreciate that. Thank you, folks, for engaging with us. And we look forward to seeing you soon. And please do not delay. If this is you, please contact us. We'd just love to talk to you. Thank you again.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.